Peace, family. This is FleurBrun coming to you today for another topic of discussion. I know you've been waiting all day. I apologize. Today is Sunday, and I have 50 million things to do on a Sunday, so I do apologize for coming late. So I've been waiting 5 hours. I'm so sorry. I kept pushing the time forward until I was there. I apologize. I am so sorry. I generally don't do that, but I am sorry. I do apologize. That's more mommy FleurBrun than anything else. Oh, I didn't know you guys were actually waiting though too. I'm sorry. I apologize because your time is valuable. So I don't mean to take advantage of your time. I just figured I'd push it. Hey, Maitreya. I was actually talking to Maitreya as well on the phone. So, okay, so let's get it in. I wanted to make this video and to talk about religion, the patriarchy, and how it actually suppresses the feminine. And it's interesting that at this particular time, as we start to see the divulging of all the truths, all the garbage and all the underlying subjugation that has been occurring over time, it's amazing that, and actually it's amazing I'm doing this on a Sunday, which is very, it's very connected to those in the Christian sect. So big up to the Christians who are actually listening to this video and actually make sure they email me telling me they're praying for my soul. I appreciate these prayers, and you can absolutely keep praying for me. I will accept all prayers anytime, all time, as long as it's for the positive and benefit of myself. So you could pray all day. So it's interesting at this particular time in okay, Pretty Pearl, I'll release that. Okay, sorry, I'm reading comments as I'm talking. So Pretty Pearl, I will release that video. The video actually was not meant to be for YouTube general view, but for some reason it went to general view. So I'm just waiting until the smoke clears a little bit for those who were trying to view it from particularly our whole YouTube sect, because that video was not meant for that. That video was meant for Patreon solely. So I'm waiting for that like a week, and then I'll place the video back into Patreon. So I'm sorry. For those who don't know what I'm talking about, it's a video that I made that was only solely for Patreon. Okay, so family. So religion, the patriarchy, and the suppression of the divine feminine. It is everywhere. As in the Trinity, you denote that there is an absence of the female even mentioned. As the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, there is obviously a negation of the feminine, even in that Trinity that most of you state when you're giving, your honor to the Christ notion. And even when we discuss, and I'll base it based on all religions have been patriarchally intercepted and manipulated to only incorporate the males, as opposed to having any sort of incorporation of the females in a divine way, in a positive way, in a way that is empowering, in a way that is honoring their spirit, their mind, and their presence in divinity. Okay, so we talk about Christianity because many people are based in Christianity, at least in the United States of America, even though we have a huge Islamic sect, and Islam in itself is suppressive of if not the same or more suppressive to the feminine. And there's a reason for that. So we'll get into that as well. We have Buddhists who suppress the feminine, Taoist, which is a suppression of the feminist. You rarely see any religion and the main base of the patriarchy that have any formulated divine presence of the feminine. Okay, so let's go into Christianity. We have the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. The negation of the female's not even mentioned. And you go toe to toe with Christians on this all day. Christians will be like, well, the Holy Spirit is the presence of the female. No. Why would they mention the Father and the Son? Now listen, family, we do understand that genetically, and I'm all about heredity, that women give birth to children. Men do not give birth to children. As we have a stargate between our legs, I know this is religion and it's gone south already. We have a yoni, which is a stargate, which allows for souls to come through our womb and we give birth to children. The fact of the matter is, if you have a lack of connection to that divine feminine aspect, it will disassemble. It will cut off beings from source, as source utilizes the womb as a way to bring forth life. So if we were more balanced, it would not be necessarily the father son. Remember, we don't come from men. Men come from women. We give birth to both sons and daughters. Okay? Men seed our wombs. They do, which they do a beautiful job if they're healthy. But we give birth to all. Oh, hold on, Lynn. Hey, Lynn. Lynn said, not SGI U.S. Buddhist religion. Women and men leaders are equal, as well as young women and men in our lay community. We are not part of the priesthood of the patriarchy. Thank you, Lynn. Lynn is talking about the SGI. Actually, when I did a Kiki session, thank you, Lynn, Kiki session with Lynn, she actually denoted that there was a group linked to the Buddhist group that SGI, which she is part of, which has a very feminine and masculine balance, which is a rarity in the realm of the patriarchy when it comes concerns with the corporate aspect of religion, because religion in itself is based in Lynn, if you can give a link to, if you can join a link to SGI so that everyone can see exactly what you're talking about, so they can look it up themselves. So Lynn, if you could put it in the comment section, the SGI group, it'd be great, so they can get an idea of what SGI is, linked to the Buddhism community. Okay, so if we were more balanced, you would obviously see that the Trinity would be involved in the mother. It would be the mother, the daughter, and the Holy Spirit, or the mother, daughter, and the son, because obviously it is the woman who gives birth to life, of both sexes of life. Whereas a man seeds a woman, he is not the one who has the ability to bring forth life based on him not having access to a stargate that allows for the soul to be placed in the womb and actually come to fruition if one's healthy. And we do realize that by negating the female in all male-based patriarchy religions, that you do have that sort of stoic, suppressive ideology that kind of sits well with all the, child molestation, latent homosexuality. Listen to what I said, because a lot of our gay family gets offended if I said latent sexuality, homosexuality, meaning that those who don't call themselves homosexuals but who engage in homosexual rituals and practices under the guise of being, they're not supposed to have any sex, so to speak. Okay, so the mother, the daughter, and the father, that would make more sense. When we go to the base of Christianity, when we speak about Jesus Christ, many people like to talk about Jesus Christ and how beautiful a being he was. And in fact, if he did exist, it would be very reminiscent of a being that would be very holistic and also connected highly to the divine. And even in the ideology that his mother was a virgin, which is interesting, because if his mother, in fact, if what the Bible states, and we take it at face value, that the Virgin Mary, meaning that she never had a wand inside of her, she was not incepted by a male, and she was had the ability through the process of parthenogenesis of giving birth to a child. We know that if she gave birth to a child, it would not be a male, it would have been a female. As the fact as if women are in their previous state where they had the ability to give birth without mating with males, they would give birth only to females. So the fact of the matter is, if you think the Bible to be true, and Jesus actually came from a Virgin Mary, even though she was married, okay, so this is when it gets a little slippery, because those who read the Bible will say, well, it's a metaphor, it's not real, or it really was Joseph. But why would they state that she's a virgin if she's married and had a husband? So obviously Joseph would be his father, not God, okay, so to speak. But if you want to play on semantics and we talk about her truly being a virgin, If she gave birth as a virgin, she would have been divinely stated as one of the ancient females and gave birth through the process of parthenogenesis, and she can only replicate herself as a female. So Jesus, if we're going on what was stated, then Jesus was actually a female and they made him into male. So there are those playing with whatever was told to us, or at least explained in the Bible. If that was explained to you all, you would understand that even in the picture of the Last Supper, where you see 12 men and one female, which is the 13th, it says 12 apostles, and there was one female, right? Mary Magdalene. There was a little bit of a rumor amongst the witches and the occultists that Mary Magdalene was actually the Jesus figure. And they took away, just like, how they'll change his story to say that it was a male who actually had these shamanic types. Sorry, just a phone call, nothing diabolical. So he was a healer. If we denote him to being what they state he was, and he came from a mother who gave birth through parthenogenesis, then she did not give birth to, quote unquote, a male. She gave birth to a female, and some of the occult factions, the old sisterhood, denote that Mary Magdalene was actually the Jesus figure that was not given credit. So she was lumped aside as a whore, okay, that walk amongst men, and that her actually partner was a male called, which wasn't Jesus at the time, it was another name of the male that they placate as Jesus Christ. This is just on the occult sect. There was a faction of females that actually have some historical chronological information that connects that Mary Magdalene was actually the Jesus figure, that she was never given the credit, and that Jesus was created to hide who she was, and she was actually the healer and the queen of a hive of males who she led and actually created all these wonderful miracles and what have you, which makes more sense if in fact you believe the Bible to be true, that Mary was a virgin. Okay, they don't like to talk about Lilith. And also, if we speak about the fact of the matter is the cross is a decapitated ankh. Listen to me, family. The cross is a decapitated ankh. If you look in old, even before the Old Testament, even when you go to some of the cathedrals in Europe, you will see that the ankh is still present. It looks a little differently. It's almost like what do they call it? It looks like a, what is it? They call it something like a certain kind of cross, the way it looks. It was decapitated. They purposefully decapitated the womb off of the cross, purposefully, to decapitate the feminine, to take away from the feminine, to depreciate the feminine, to negate her, as to not give her credit, just like Mary Magdalene in some occult versions is actually Christ herself, who did all the miracles, who healed all, who was the one who walked amongst many, who walked in many different walks of life, who healed people, but was never given credit. Now, I'm giving you this version, okay? I'm just giving you this version. I'm not saying that this is necessarily what it is, but if we are going to play semantics and read books of literature that was dominated by males who had obviously had such a very low field of regard of the feminine, especially the divine feminine, you will understand that all information, just like in the information of now, like the Sphinx, the nose has been cut off to take away from racial component of the Sphinx being related to people who are Negro or brown or Africano or carbon. Okay, so we know in history that history is written by those who are in domination, who are actually the ones who are the placators of historical facts based on their own ideology that they want to put forth. Okay, so we talk about this, and we speak about how religions have subjugated corporate based patriarchal religions have subjugated suppression of the feminine, including Islam, which Islam will say all day that it honors the feminine. It gives her credence and honor and who she is in her natural state. But if this is the case that you honor the feminine, why is it in every country that has Islam as its primary religion that the female walks behind the male, not in security, not because he is to walk forth to protect her, but in him walking forward because he is above her. He is the one who is to be seen first. He is the head of her. He is the one who calls all the shots ahead of her. Even when I've done, I've talked to many people in Jordan, in Saudi Arabia, in Kuwait. I've talked to people in Dubai. I've talked to people who are in Palestine and in Pakistan. I talk to many different people, so I get an ideology not based on what is the theme of what's being projected to me, based on television or historical books and archives that are placed in front of us that we're supposed to believe. Notice I use the word believe are real. I talk to actually people who are part of those sects of religions. And it's interesting that as I talk to the female base, I notice that the main theme in Islam is a subjugation of female and a negation of even her intellect, to the point where it affects her soul, her mind, her self-esteem, and her worthiness amongst her sons. Even her sons can subjugate her as a mother, and even her sons can call the shots, even to the negation of the safety of the base of the family. Why is it that you have priesthoods that are all males? Even in Christianity, when you see the females present, you still see them in a subjugated form. Even when I go, and I was, reared by Roman Catholics. Catholics are, we call it the watered down version of Christianity, because we don't, raised as a Catholic, it's not much you do. If you go to religious instruction, I feel it's more watered down, at least in the States. When you go to Europe or in Canada, it's a little more, or you go to Central America where they have a heightened amount. Now, what's interesting? You go to places like South America, Central America, places where there's a lot of Latinos. I don't like to use Latino. I say Latinos in a quote unquote because Latinos is a disrespectful term. A lot of these people are the people of the Incan, the people of the Mayan, that Incan bloodline that have been subjugated and watered down and depreciated. I notice that when I go amongst Latinos who have a heightened amount of mind control connected to Christianity, there is a heightened amount of abuse, verbal and physical abuse, that happens in Latin America, and a lack of respect of the divine, meaning that males are either accepted to be abusers or have a multitude of sexual partners. There's a degradation of the feminine, the partnership of the families. I understand that I do see in Latin America a beautiful family niche, meaning that the mothers are very loving and abiding. But I do notice that in a lot of the Hispanic Latino communities, quote unquote, because I don't like the word Latina. It's a colonized word meant to subjugate a people and take on an idea, culture of beings, Europeans that came there and subjugated and killed them and murdered them. I respect our Latino sect. Okay, so for that reason, why is it that places that have the most heightened amount of obsession or Christianity, most poignant Christian values, are the places that have the most subjugation and most abuse of women? Because it's all one and the same. Even in Buddhist temples, when you go to the Taoist not all Latin communities or South America is more accepting of domestic violence. I don't say that they're accepting. Listen to my words. I don't say that they're more accepting. I say that it happens at a heightened rate. It happens more, it's more common to hear in places where there is a heightened amount of Christianity as the base, and especially in Catholicism, that I see and I notice and I'm aware based on my expression and how I view things, that there is a heightened amount of subjugation of the female and a lot more physical and verbal abuse in quote unquote Latin communities. And again, I don't like using the word Latin communities, and I told you why. Because it's a colonized, even Hispanic is a colonized word that is not respectful to the indigenous that are from those areas. Okay. Let's see. I agree. It's common in South America. Yes. Okay. I'm just reading comments as I'm going on. But it's interesting that even in more passive religions, what we consider to be more passive and more holistic, Hinduism, Buddhism, Taoism, the Taoist belief, that even in those more, what you would consider to be more holistic, meaning they're more connected to nature, there is a suppression of the feminine based on the fact that you won't see many women. You'll see Buddhists go in these wonderful places in Thailand, and I'd rather be Latin than Hispanic. I agree, but the terminology is a colonized terminology. That is, I walk amongst many politically heightened indigenous Central American and South Americans of the Incan and Mayan bloodline, and they refute that word, Latino. It is something that is a subjugated term that they choose, if they're healthy, to not necessarily uphold that terminology. There's another terminology which is utilized in Central and South America. What's her name? Conta Blanca. There's a revolutionary woman. I follow her. She's wonderful. She talks about the subjugation and the colonization of the indigenous in Central and South America. Beautiful young sea star. I've followed her for years. She just really gets deep into the subjugation and the because really when we talk in terms of suppression of the feminine, that was not necessarily something that the indigenous ever really had issues with. That's why the feminist movement is something that is oddly, can't remember her name. I'm gonna remember her. I'll put her link to this video. She's from a movement called Inca Planka. Is it Inca Planka? Inca Planka. I forgot her name. I'll add her name to this video. She's, again, for some, remember, she's a very piloted, very politically, very politically piloted activist, and she utilizes words based on colonist, so just know if you go into her, just be respectful, because she is the face of Mexicanos, of the Central Americans, the plight of the beings that live there. And I really appreciate her spirit, and it talks volumes to my heart and soul when I listen to her. So I just wanted to state that. And again, I wish I had my what you call it? I have all the names of a lot of the beings that I remember. My memory is not that great, and her name is not that it's difficult. It's just not something I say often. So I'll add that. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. I love her plight, and she's not followed by many. It's interesting. She talks about the Ecuadorians and the connection. That's how I learned that many of the people from Central America that were from El Salvador, the warring of certain gangs, was actually connected to the Incans, and they still do some of the same, like the finger, the gang signs is really linked to a lot of the native indigenous patterns and behavior that occurred when they were living under a more holistic regime prior to colonization. So she really discussed that, and I'm kind of sidebarring, so I'm sorry. So let's go back to religion and patriarchy. Okay, so we talk about that, and as we saw that there was a snuffing away of the divine feminine, and it was kind of written out of history, the gifts that females brought to spirituality, the connection to divine source that comes with having a womb and being able to give forth life and bring to fruition life, there is a negation of that in all facets. And like I said, when you go into if you go into what you call it, the Buddhists, and seeing how they isolate themselves, yeah, I would like to know if there's more female monks. You don't hear about them because there's only a propaganda showing male monks. And even when you see the monks walk amongst the people in Thailand or in other places in Eastern in what's going on education? Education's upset at somebody. Education invention. Is someone on here saying something? Oh, okay. Okay. I'm just reading comments, family. Okay. I mean, even, okay, I'm sorry. Even with the monks, when they go into isolation in the mountains, you will see that, okay, I'm sorry. I saw you made a mistake. Thank you, Betraya. You will see that there will be an isolation of males without any females, and they actually make it a point to ban females from having any contact. It could be for sexual reasons because they are all practicing forms of abstinence, which most religion sects do. But as we get back into Christianity and also into forms of Islam, you will see that many of the times that there are those who are involved in forms of abstinence, which is considered to be, they take that on as part of their commitment of their religion. They will actually have some issues and end up having some subsidiary low field sexual desires for a lot of times other males or children. I'm not upset. Do not blame nothing I do in Black America who lie. Okay. All right. Okay. Well, remember, with males, it is the same with, you have to think as above, so below. What you see is, even with the Y chromosome and the X chromosome, they consider it to be a Y. Those who are geneticists, those who are based in heredity or study genes, will know that there is no such thing as a Y chromosome. It is a broken X. Listen to me, family. It's not my synopsis. It is a fact. Even looking under a microscope, when you're looking at the chromosomal ley lines, you will notice that the Y is just one leg of the X being broken off, and it looks like a Y. Kind of like what you saw on my shoulder that time. Okay? So if we realize that males are women that have a piece of them missing, you may be able to fill in the lines as why you may be starting to see males turning more feminine, and this being maybe attacked in this particular time, because we're going back into another cycle. Now, I might get residuals from this because it's hard for people to understand that. But when you have a genetic mutation like that, it will attempt to correct itself. So when you start to see males displaying more feminine type of behavior at a time when we're going into another cycle out of patriarchy, you may be seeing, now listen, I said you may be seeing males healing up an aspect and trying to get back to the divine state of being. Okay, you're starting to see males, their genome trying to correct itself, if it was a mutation at all. Okay, so this goes, we get into heredity. I don't want to really get into that. I want to try to keep on the line of being focused, but I know for a fact that when you look at a Y in the microscope, it is a broken X. It is a mutation that occurred, and it occurred at a time when the patriarchy started coming online. Okay. No, not gay. Education's going off here. It's not a matter of being gay. Listen, gay is a socialized ideology that comes into practice. Okay, you shouldn't hate anyone. Education, don't hate anyone. That's we want to observe everyone as they are, how they show up in the world. Okay, so hating one person can bring in that aspect in your life that will make you karmically accept or see it from a different angle. So you want to make sure that you utilize your discernment to pull out hate, because hate is a really strong invocation of emotions that could bring in karma to help you soften that judgment. Okay, so be mindful, education. Okay, so for that reason, we're starting to see more males come back into a more balance with feminine consciousness. And it doesn't necessarily come back as what you consider to be homosexual, but if you're seeing males being more emotional, being more connected to their feminine selves, starting to mimic some of that feminine energy, do know that at another cycle, as we're going back into the divine matriarchy, which is coming online, you will have the residue of those males who need to come back in balance with their divine feminine counterparts. Okay, and it's not always necessarily that they're going to turn into females. What it is that the healthier males will end up being in balance, meaning that sexually, physically, mentally, and spiritually, they will be able to bond with their female partners more so than before. Okay, and now we're also starting to see. Well, no, I tell them not to hate either, education. Yeah, obviously you know me, education, for a while. If I get any lunars on here who promote hate, I would say the same to them. I'm an equal opportunist. I hold my tongue for no one, no person. Okay, well, that's your choice, education. If you choose to feel that way, I can't, that is your choice. And I can't, I just tell you to, be mindful and to, to view things in a different way. But you choose how you choose your own conscious mind and how you choose to engage with beings. Okay, so I just had to break a wannabe Israelite Mexican down about this. I hit him with the science of mitochondrial DNA and the heritage based on moms. Yes. And this is also why you will hear that many of them, now Hebrews, we'll get into Israelites and the people of Judaism who have a different form of concept and acceptability when it comes to the female. A lot of times, especially and I've talked about the Orthodox Jews and the Jews, they do accept that when a child is born from a Hebrew womb, a womb of an Israelite, a woman who's of Judaic practices and genomes, that child holds that nationality. And that goes along the lines of all the different tiers of the Judaic, usually all the Judaic practices of all the beings who are in that. So meaning that if a Jewish mother gives birth to a child, even if she's with a Gentile, she's giving birth to that child holds Jewish nationality. Okay, and that's an overstanding that the female holds the extra mitochondria, the extra genome that she gives to her child. She transfers to her child upon birth. Okay, so how is the patriarchy accountable for the depreciation of the feminine on the planet? Based on all the wars, religious wars that have come over the last 2,000-3,000 years, I'd say 2,000 years, maybe 2,000 plus years, there has been battles between mostly between Islam and Christianity. Those are the two main battles that have occurred over time for supremacy. And those are the two that are most suppressive of the feminine base on the planet. And during the time when when we had the consistent battle and the chafing and the going back and forth between the two, you notice that the dichotomy that created a rift between man and woman has become more detrimental and more overt over time, and it comes to the state of being where now you're starting to see the lines being drawn between male and female, even in those compartmentalized religions. whether it be Christian. Remember, Christianity has all different sects. You've got Protestants, you've got Baptists, you've got Seven-Day Adventists. 7-day. What are they? 7-day something rather. I'm sorry. Catholics. Well, you've got, Mormons. You've got all sects in Christianity, and also in Islam. You have different sects of Islam. There are all different sects in Islam, and it shows up in their practices. They have alternative practices, the way that they do prayer, just a little bit of everything, which I think in itself is beautiful. I love seeing different types of sects coming out in even a main. If one religion may have different specs of how it shows up, which I am in admiration of. Okay, so for that reason, we're starting to see the purging of the religious base based on patriarchy, because patriarchy now is ended. If you don't know, now you know. The matriarchy is coming online, and that is why you're seeing religion becoming such. That's why you've seen an attack on Islam, and that's why you're seeing an attack on Christianity. It is the patriarchy going back to each other, because it has to X each other out in order to get rid of it totally. So what are you saying, FleurBrun? Is Christianity going to end? No, Christianity in itself, in its core, in the belief system, if in the belief system, the core itself, like even in, I told you my ex has a statement on the end of each one of his emails. It says, Christ, Buddha says, I love Christ, the Christ figure, but I do not like the Christians. The Christians are not likened to the Christ that they worship, meaning that those who worship Christ are the least like Christ, even though they worship him. And I thought that was such a beautiful statement, because in the values and the parables connected to what Christ represented, even though I've denoted that Christ, if he came from, let's just say Jesus, if he came from Mary, who was a virgin, it was through the process of parthenogenesis, and he was a female. And that means it wasn't Jesus that existed. It was probably Mary Magdalene, who was actually the Christ figure, who they took away her actual credibility and her connection to her being the actual being that was out there doing miracles and so on. Okay? So now we're starting to see the battle between the two. You're starting to see in the United States of America Christians who feel like that every Islamic person is a terrorist. They call them all day. I've sat and listened to all kinds of Christians, Brown, Lunars, talk about all Muslims as being terrorists, which is absolutely absurd, because if you're talking about beings that you have no connection with, you actually don't even have any sense of, personal interaction with, how could you draw such a strong conclusion when I've seen just as many Christian people go and shoot up churches? Many of the bombings that happened in the 60s were done by lunar Christians who bombed little brown babies in churches and did not have didn't bat an eye in doing so, and quoted the Bible while they were doing so. And also, if we're going to bring in historical values, if you're going to talk about Muslims, we should bring up the fact that in the 50s and 40s and 20s, it was common in the South for people to have picnics, which was pick a nigger. Excuse my language. That's where the word picnic came from. Thank you, Barry Littleton. He actually posted that on his page. Pick a nigga. They actually used to have picnics where churches used to sell tickets to have burnings and lynchings of brown men, when children and mothers and males were sitting down idly eating their picnic, their lunches, while they watched brown males being lynched, burned, and mutilated, and pieces of their body were given as tokens and heirlooms to those who attended. So for those who are wanting to call Muslims savages, please denote some of the savagery that is quite. I can get a pamphlet today of the churches that actually had the tickets sold, pick a nigga, where they actually do that. And still in Mississippi, they lynch brown people today, and mothers will sit down with their children eating lunch while that's done so. And this is all under the guise of Christianity. So it is a true story. And if I tell you, family, if you think that it is a lie, we should go and you can Google it, and you will see those pamphlets of churches that still exist today, some of them, in the South and otherwise, that did have these common practices of having after services of praising Jesus Christ, that they would go and sit underneath a tree and lynch a brown person, an innocent person forever, and sometimes children. They would lynch a little boy or a little girl and watch them pee on themselves. And then as they're screaming and so on, they're enjoying their sandwiches and their snacks with their babies running around watching people being burned. So if you think that Muslims are savages, I would cause you to reflect on those who did that. And actually, some of the ancestors of those people still exist to this day and still tell those stories or still have remembrances of those stories. And they are still in churches to this day that did do that previously and may, even under a more quiet guise, may still be doing that to this day. Okay? So I just say to you, if you want to call a spade, then look on both sides. Because at the same point that we want to call certain people religion savages, you have to look on the other side. You know, I look at those in Muslim faith, and even with the subjugation of women, I do see that praying 5 times a day, finding God and connection to God, finding that and finding a space to pray every day, there is some sort of commitment to connecting to source, which I find to be appeasing and also refreshing. So I know many a Christian who go to church on a Sunday, but will curse, rape, molest, drink, drug, and judge all day, 5 days a week, 6 days a week until church time on Sunday, and think that they'll get exonerated from either going to confession if they're Christian, if they're Catholic, confessing their sins, or going to church and listening to a wonderful, beautiful sermon, which many beautiful Christian churches do have the most beautiful, wanting, inviting sermons that talk about possibilities and talk about wonderful things of the community. Okay, so if you're going to judge Muslims, make sure you judge them from a fair vantage point, and make sure you're able to reflect upon your own beings who come from Christianity, who've done some sinful, awful, horrific things, and don't even take accountability for it, even though we have archives to show proof of them doing so. You know, there are those Muslims that do go in other countries. Remember, Muslims in other countries are different people, and also I'm not giving an unfair vantage point, but to state that all Islamic people are terrorists is insane when you go to their countries where you have colonizers who want their resources, go over there and bomb their mothers and children, and many of these men walk around with beheaded children, their babies beheaded. I've seen the films and I've watched them with my heart broken. You will see in Palestine where Israel will bomb babies, knowing that there's mothers and babies and elders in a place, and will bomb them. And you will see the fathers walk around with their beheaded children, or children without limbs, or watch their children die, and you wonder why they become independent bombers. You wonder why they become Unabombers, even though you've seen these men have seen their mothers die in their arms, or you've seen women watch their husbands' heads blown off. But you wonder where that terrorist cell comes from, but you don't have an accountability of the incitement and the propagating of behavior that has caused people to lose their minds. Because for you to blow yourself up with a bomb on your body means you have already lost your mind. And it usually means that you've experienced so much harm that you would prefer to leave this earth and take a few motherfuckers with you because they've done harm to you and yours. I'm not justifying it, but I'm telling you to look at it from a different angle. Because if it was a Christian here, if it was one of those Christians that was over here that lost their family, that these wonderful, beautiful Christians that sit in church had to watch their loved ones being murdered or killed, I want to ask you, how sane would a person be? And if they could get a chance to take it back on the persons or people who did it, how sane would they be? And how can we denote how that would surface later on in them becoming something like a terrorist cell based on what happened to them? The trauma causes hurt people. Okay, so you have these two factions of Christians and Islam fighting each other, which is a balancing of the pendulum, because they are both the most oppressive religions on the earth at this point. We have other religions that have existed, but if you believe and know that all of the female-based connected religions, such as Wiccans, Voodoons, also, what is the other one? Jean-Gage, Obia, there's a main one. Those who are coming from what are considered to be occult. Now remember, they will, Santeria, thank you, Santeria, Yoruba, those are all feminine based. And look at how they're demonized. Look at how beautifully demonizing witches. Now we go to the witch trials in Salem, and many of the women that were pagan, many of the women Gnostic, many of the women that were engaged in what was considered to be witchcraft were also healers, likened to what Mary would have given birth to if she gave birth to Mary Magdalene, which was probably Jesus Christ. But I don't want to be facetious. Okay, so many of the witches that were killed were herbalists, were doulas, were midwives, were independent healers that healed the community under the guise of the governmental system that was also there. They were very nature. Thank you, Maitreya. They were nature-based beings, but they were murdered and killed for being powerful in their craft. Now, listen, craft and witch, crafty in which they do. Okay, so they were killed and murdered for doing that. Now, that was a residual from the Stoic patriarchy of religious-based Christians who wanted to dominate the field of spirituality, and they needed to snuff out anything of validity that was anti to their lack of connection to source. So they murdered, I think it was hundreds or thousands of witches, and they weren't all witches. These were herbalists, doulas, midwives that were murdered and killed under the guise, and some were sultry women that had the charm to charm males that we would call, thoughts to this day, or sirens that were also murdered under the guise because they were entraining men's minds. So they were lumped together with the witches. Even though they weren't witches, they were just sexually very, sultry women that engaged with some married males. And those were also women that were thrown into the guise of being witches. They were burned and killed. Look at the way witches are depicted in public eye. Look at the Wizard of Oz. She's green and ugly. All witches are depicted as ugly and demonic, but most witches that are connected to nature are actually beautiful and divine and actually the most alluring and seductive. Thank you, Revenge. The most seductive of all beings. The majority of witches that are practicing witches are actually very beautiful. And the same with voodoo. Voodoo's been demonized, and Obeah's been demonized, and all these quote-unquote occult practices are demonized based on the fact that they are matriarchal based, meaning that they come from a more feminine base. These are some of the practices that were pulled and preserved from the previous matriarchy. Hold on. Okay. Okay. Sorry. Okay, so I'm sorry, I sidebarred. It's a Sunday. I'm a mommy. So we discussed how the corporate religious system that is presently being disbarred and broken down and actually being met with another Stoic religion that has been suppressive of women, because this is a religious war that we're experiencing right now. You think that everything is happening out here is based on nationality. You think it's based on, countries. No, it's a religious war that you're seeing, and it is meant to balance and create a happy equilibrium, because once they actually go toe to toe, they will be both eliminated, and it will cause a wonderful universal balance that will allow for the matriarchy to actually come back online, and actually unity consciousness will be able to flow in easier without these religious factions. That's why you're starting to see some males in the patriarchy become more religiously based. If you notice that even amongst a lot of our wonderful brown males, the brown males are becoming more polygamous. They're becoming more based in really stoic type of practices that are pushing and propelling for more suppression of females, because patriarchy is losing its footing, and it realizes that it will be no longer able to hold its home court advantage. So it's trying at every angle to find out ways to placate itself to actually suppress the feminine. So it's calling for more of that Judaic, Christian, Islamic suppression in any way, in which way. So now in the brown males, in the conscious, pseudo-conscious community, you're starting to see more of that that placating of polygamy as a way to subjugate and pull in the feminine aspect and control her and subjugate her and create a sense of suppression. Like, listen, like, I can have several women. I like a herd. I can, you know, that's there for me because I'm still the domineering one, and I have control over them, and I can, you know, breed with them. It's a form of suppression. And even when we're talking about the males out here right now that are mainlining in quote unquote a conscious community, if you notice that they start out sounding all cool and savvy into nature, you know who I'm talking about, and then all of a sudden you start hearing Bible verses coming out of their mouth. Bible verses, because that's a form of control, because they've lost control, so now they have to go back to the Bible. They have to go back to Christianity or Islam to suppress, to utilize those tools, those classic tools, to try to be able to subjugate the hateful subjugation and suppression of women. So they sound what we consider to be a little odd, because at first they sounded like they were not connected to religion, and they're really not. They're just using, you're not, you already know what I'm talking about. They're just utilizing the religion that has been a tool of the corporate patriarchy to suppress women. So they're utilizing the same tool. So it even though it looks like a different snake, it's still a three-headed snake. It's still on the same body. So, and if you notice that more of the feminine, lunars, our Asian, our indigenous Central South Americans and North Americans, our Africanos, our Moors, all of the female base, if you notice where they're all going all of a sudden, if you notice that there are more practices going back into nature, into paganism, into occultism, they are starting to pull back into the system that is where the divine sisterhood, the matriarchy, had a main source of power, which is beautiful, because within upholding that, bringing back or allowing the flow of nature, because nature is all the elements of what many of these feminine based practices, whether it be in the occult or paganism or Druids, the Druids actually enjoy doing. It's bringing back that element that the female base has brought back in online, and she can utilize in order to bring her mind, body, and spirit back into a healthy, cohesive form of consciousness, so that she can raise to the level of unity and higher consciousness and higher frequency that she was in her original form, in the original, when we're going back into the first cycle, which is matriarchy, the home court of the matriarch. Genus, etymology translates to woman. Very good. Who's that? Mach 9. Very good. Absolutely. Absolutely. Most Caribbean island women still be on Jesus. Yeah, I agree. And that's where we have an issue. What you eat is everything. I agree. You know, like I have an orange. I was actually looking for green oranges. I know this is Mach. Mach. Did I pronounce it right? Mach? Okay. Mach? Okay. I was looking for green oranges. We have green oranges on my island. These are oranges. These are all oranges are genetically modified. It's, the oranges are not supposed to be oranges. They're supposed to be green, at least where I come from. You know, so I just wanted to kind of bring this on the line. You know, Jesus was not who you think he was. It wasn't even a he, it was a she. And it was really Mary Magdalene, who they called a whore because she was a hybrid who had a heightened sense of pheromonic harmonics, and she had all those men and trained, probably had them sexually servituding her. I know I'm going to be called all kind of blasphemous at this point. Like purple carrots. Yeah, purple carrots. Yeah, everybody's going, oh my gosh, she said Jesus was a whore and she was a female. I'm not saying that, but, you know, they depicted, you know, Mary Magdalene as a whore, and you see her as the 13th seat on the Last Supper. And it's interesting that you say it's 12 disciples, but really, when did you ever seen 12 men hang out with each other, wash each other's feet, and hang out without any female base? It's not true. It's something to keep the female element out of it. And I personally think she was the queen who, if the story was true, I don't know, I'm not going to say that yay or nay, but I'm saying if she was a virgin and she gave birth through the process of parthenogenesis, she gave birth to a feminine, and if she gave birth to a female and she's hanging about with a whole bunch of 12 men who were hanging around her only, I say she had them entrained, and she was a queen, some sort of hybrid that had those men entrained, and she had abilities, and she was probably, you know, one of the most wonderful healers of that time. And I personally think they probably, of course, if she existed, they probably tried to murder her. But if she's a hybrid, she got away, and all the males probably paid for the crimes of what she was considered to have done. That's just my take on it, if she existed, if that was the way it was. Now, if she wasn't a virgin and Joseph had sex with her and they want to do that, then it's a different story. But I said, if you're going to follow the exact verbiage of what they said, then Mary Magdalene was the one. And it wasn't really Jesus. And remember, we didn't even have J's at the time. You know, when you start getting into John, Peter, and all that stuff, there were no names. There was no names in ancient Africa because, remember, there was no Middle East back then either. If we're going to go into Israel, all of that was Africa. There was no Middle East. Middle East was created later on. The name Middle East came on later on. It was division in that region, but that was all considered Africa. If you know history, and some of you are historical beings, you would know that there was no such thing as a Middle East. Those were all Africans, okay? North Africans, South Africans, whatever, but that was all Africa, okay? That came with colonization. When colonization came and colonizers were taking over regions of Africa, they started to separate it and call it the Middle East. That's why Middle Easterners look a little more European as opposed to looking more Africano, more Nubian, as they did previous to colonization. That's a fact. You can look that up. I can make nothing up. When everyone says to me, FleurBrun, you go so far-fetched, I say, well, listen, I could be all kinds of cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs, but if you really want to overstand, that's why the original Jewish people were Ethiopians and and people from Yemen actually were in Israel. That's why they brought back the people from Yemen and Ethiopia, because they actually resided in Israel. Their bloodline actually, if you go back into the bloodline of those in Israel, which are now today dominated by European converts that call themselves Ashkenazi Jews, which are not Jewish people. They are converts, Russian converts. They are not of bloodline to be there in parts, especially in Tel Aviv. Those are not beings that were from there. That was land given to them by the United States after the war. That was actually engineered by Jewish people themselves, Zionists themselves. I will not talk about that. I talked about that on Patreon. I don't want to get all kinds of controversial. But the original beings that there were Ethiopian and Yemen. They were the same beings. Okay, so, if you don't believe me, see, when I say things, I tell you to source it out, because I know when you find it, you'll be like, oh my gosh, she's telling me the truth. I'm of a certain age. I studied a lot. I know a lot of people. I've traveled the world. So I see things as they really are. I don't see how things are propagated to me. I actually see what they actually are to be. Okay, so it was all Africa. Yeah, 1945. You already know the deal. Anyway, so please don't get all stuck in religion. And, I always tell my wonderful indigenous brown people that are actually really still bent on being connected and mind controlled by the biblical teachings that are keeping them under forms of conditioning that is suppressing them. And it is why I tell brown people, why do you think that Jewish people are not rocking swastikas? And they look at me like I'm crazy. Why would a Jewish person who's been through supposedly the genocidal war that occurred in Germany and Poland and in Eastern Europe that were subjugated to genocide, why would a Jew wear a swastika? And they say, no, why would a Jew wear a swastika? That's insane. You know why they wouldn't wear a swastika? Because they realized that that was a symbol that was meant to subjugate them. So I say to my brown people, my indigenous people that are practicing in Christianity, why do you wear a cross? Crosses were the first symbol. It's not the Ankh. The cross was the first symbol that was shown on the ships that entered into Africa and in Central America and in South America and in North America before the genocide and the murders and rapes of the people happened. That was the sign that they used to murder those people. Why would you wear that? You know why you think it's okay to wear it? Because you were suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. You are identifying with those who harmed and murdered you. Swastikas from Ethiopia, I realize that. I'm just talking about the Europeans that were considered Jews in Germany. Why would they not wear a swastika after the horrific acts that were placated in Europe during World War II? Why would they not wear it? I know where the swastika comes from. All symbols have been flip mode and inverted for purposes of disbarring them or utilizing them for another reason. But why would they not wear it? Because it was a symbol of deprivation. It was a symbol of murder. It was a symbol of their subjugation. Why would one wear a cross? Why would you wear a cross if you're a person of color and involved in Christianity? I see it as a form of mind control. I see it as you were suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. I don't really get in arguments with Christians because if you are rocking a cross, you understand that means that's actually a symbol that will suppress you. If you wear a cross as a person of color, not all. Lunars can wear crosses. It won't mean the same to them. It won't affect their genomes the same way. If you wear a cross as a person of color, this is my opinion. If you wear a cross as a person of color, not an Ankh. Ankh is something different. It's inclusive of the mother. An Ankh is something different. If you wear a cross as a person of color, you will bring in more pain, subjugation, because you are okay with rocking something that hurt and harmed your people. And it was the first symbol you saw before they landed on your land and they colonized and murdered and totally ruined your whole society. So when I see a person of color rocking a cross, I question their sanity. And I know that they're suffering from Stockholm Syndrome. And I keep a stiff arm away and realize that until they accept and acknowledge what that means to them, that is nothing that I can really, I don't necessarily want to bypass them. I don't want to judge them. I just keep a distance because someone under that form of mind control and suffering from that form of Stockholm Syndrome is literally going to cause problems in your life. They just will. Based on the fact that they lack self-awareness and they lack enough sense to study history to acknowledge that even though their people were subjugated by this symbol, it's not something you should rock. Okay, if you want to rock an Ankh all day, absolutely. But the fact of the matter, if you're rocking a cross, you will bring more deprivation in your life. I've never seen anyone wearing crosses that has done super, super well. I've seen it cause harm spiritually to them. Okay, so... Pray for me, Christians. I know I challenge your peace of mind, but I do this only to service your higher mind, and I speak to you based on facts and historical archives that are necessary for you to raise to your higher sense of consciousness. Okay? And if you keep involving yourself and connecting yourselves to things that are connected to patriarchy that is now no longer in home court advantage, then you too will be on the sinking ship or the losing team because there is a lot of debt to be paid. All debts are to be paid at the end and beginning of the cycle. It's like we're checking out of the hotel hell, hotel hell, patriarchy hell, and all bills are due. All checks need to be paid. All debt is owed at this point. So if you want to hold on to ideologies that are connected to the losing and cycle that is no longer in home court advantage, then you too will deal with what's necessary to clear you of some of that, that field of veil that you refuse to look beyond. That's why most people are suffering. Why do you think all the priests, all the priests, everything, all the rapes that they've done to little children is all coming out? Why do you think it's coming out? Why do you think all the preachers, all these debaucherous preachers that preach and tell you to pay tithes so that they can fly in private planes and they can ride in fancy cars, even though they're in hoods where people can't even afford to pay their rent, and they have that? Why do you think all of their spots are being blown, that they're pedophiles, or they're misogynists, or that they're womanizers, or that they've been tax evading? Why do you think that's all coming out? Because debt is paid. Karma is due. Pay your bill. If you don't pay it, they're going to come for you. That's all I have to say. The sons are here. We've got 2 sons, and we have 3 that are showing up. So, fire in the yard. You know how the Jamaicans say, fire in the yard? Fire in the yard. Okay, so I suggest you listen. Most of us we're not on. You need to find yourself a raft and jump off that sinking ship, and you better hope that some of those on the mothership, the rainbow violet ships, will take you on if you don't have a lot of residue left over from the patriarchy doing harm to women. But if y'all have been hurting the divine, if you're a woman beater, if you're a child molester, if you're a man that likes young women to take advantage of them, if you've been stealing, robbing, lying, then you must know that there is no refuge for you in the new paradigm, at least on our new earth. You will be on the old earth that will experience pain, residuals from all that you've done, karmic debt, all that's necessary to clean and clear you from the lack of self-awareness. So, do what you do. Lines have already been drawn. I'm just talking about the religious patriarchy that's been suppressing women. If you're part of those religious sects, I feel for you, and I have no empathy. You've chosen that, and you've chosen to sit and idly and enjoy the perks when you were in home court advantage, even though it was to depreciation of your female counterparts or your sisters, your mothers, your daughters, right? Okay, so you've assumed those privileges based on your position. Now that position is exonerated. It's gone. It's been taken away. We have a new cycle where the matriarchy is online. It is facts. Look at every movie and the replacement of males. Look at Ghostbusters. Ghostbusters was remade with a whole bunch of women. Okay? Look at Annie. A little brown girl took over. Okay, so it's happening. It is happening. The divine feminine is taking over and sitting in placement of matriarchy. Where will these males sit? And please try not to judge males who are upholding a feminine status, because again, that broken X, that broken Y, broken X, half full, half empty, that broken X that we call a Y, for the YX, those males have to come back home to the mother. And how they come back home to mother, we shouldn't judge. They have to come home. Some will come home by upholding mother's physical paralysis because they want to have more of that feminine. And some will come home by mating and doing right by the feminine. However it happens, it will happen. So family, that's all the video I want to make today. I know I was late. If I insulted you in any way, I apologize for insulting you. It was not my intent. I submit to her. That's right, Black Panther, Film Trust. Yeah, listen, and it's not that. It's just even in discussions with my partner, with my mate, and he's from Jamaica, from Kingston. Even with my mate, I insulted you, education. I'm sorry. You'll love me tomorrow. Even if you're upset with me now, education, you will love me tomorrow. Even in a discussion with my mate, he's such a warrior, such a strong male figure. It's so beautiful to acknowledge him coming online in my strength and me showing up in such a very powerful way as I'm accepting who I am, what I need to do for myself as being a role model to my own little ones. It's so beautiful to see a male who's such a warrior. I mean, he's lethal in his own right. There are males who fear him for good reason, especially if they're not doing right. You never let me yet. That'll be you'll be fine. It's so beautiful to see him, as in the movie in Black Panther, in the midst of war, that he kneels before me, not in defeatist mode, but in honor. My mate does that for me, and it's beautiful to see that. Though I've gone through a stage with being with a Nazi who was suppressive to my energy and me finding out who I am, that I have made it with a male who is in honor with my strength, but not as an unequal. He sees me as one to honor, in my strength, and I with him. So I think it's beautiful in itself. So I speak to that, and I don't say anything to you from a position of being domineering over men. I have a mate who's quite strong. And like I said, he's a divine male, and he shows up beautifully. But he's not perfect, as I'm not. And I do acknowledge that we're in those times where, and he's accepting of the feminine principle coming online. So he's in honor of that, and he's in awe of that. So I think it's beautiful. Aw, you honor me. I know, education. I know you get feisty sometimes. You're okay. You have a good consciousness, and you have a good heart. You have a good spirit. You have such strong feelings of your position, and I understand that, and I respect that you are at your own level of overstanding and and vibration and frequency. And you've spoken before on this live, so I see you come, but just be careful of your judgment, because you'll be humbled, like I've been. I've been humbled when I judge anyone, you know what I mean? So just be humble in that way. What are you calling people? Thoughts? Education, you know better. You don't come to the divine. You come to my divine platform, and you're calling my sea stars thoughts. Stop it already. You need to behave yourself. There's no thoughts on this one. And if they're thoughts, they're thoughts. Thoughts, higher thoughts of consciousness. There's no thoughts on here. Watch your mouth. You need a little bit of reprimanding from the divine, and maybe you will honor her presence a little differently. You need a little education in that way, education. Some males who are so strong in that way, we have to help keep our divine strong, aka our women. They are the keys to our nationhood. Oh, beautiful. Mock, I love your that's where they come from. Sure, I didn't. You called them thoughts. Education, you don't want me to block you. I left my mate because he treated me terrible. See? Yeah, just let him go. Throw him to the sea, and something. You can't create a space for someone else if you have someone sitting there. You know what I mean? You can't. See, education. You're gonna have all the divines coming for you. You need to be respectful on this platform. We can't honor you if you don't honor yourself, because by calling out your mouth other women, things like that are subjugated terms, and that's judgmental terms, you will bring in some more residuals of karma. Okay? Yeah, if you don't release the person sitting in a seat that is non-deserving of that seat, there will not be any room to bring in something that is actually permissible to sit in the seat in your realm. So you have to release in order to release a seat, an opening for something that is more applicable to you. I felt assaulted. That she said, I felt assaulted. She said she learned Jesus was a slave. I'm sorry. You guys go ham in this. You guys go ham in this. I'm sorry. What do you? I don't know what happened. I'm laughing because who said that? Jesus was a slave. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. It's not funny. I'm wrong. Education, you're absolutely right. I'm wrong. I'm just, yeah, I'm confused too. I don't know where that came from. Yeah. Education, don't take everything so personally. Sometimes they mess with you. Sometimes they're messing with you because you can be egregious. That's all it is. Yeah, you come out with statements, so you kind of deserving of some of the backlash. You are. You say some outlandish things, so you get outlandish things said back to you. You know, it's kind of like a ricochet. So don't start, no won't be none. That's how they say it in the Bronx. Don't start, no won't be none. Education. Anyway, let's leave that be. So anyway, family, I hope this was a helpful video. Hey, Netra. Yeah, well, Kay, if he's insulting females, he will, you know, your karma is what you do. So when you insult one, you get more backlash from one. So whatever you do is your karma. So I don't have to worry about anything if he's been insulting the females. He'll be dealt with females all day, all tomorrow, all week until he acknowledges his insults. You know, that's how karma comes. When we do harm or say something negative, then everything comes at us until we resolve it. That's all it is. So, right, you love females, you need to be nicer and stop calling them names. Education. Yeah, karma has no time frame. It just comes for you. So, you know, we all get humbled, all of us, including myself. So, you know, anyway, I hope this video was helpful. And again, it was not any need to be disrespectful in any way. I just wanted to give a different perspective and show how things are actually coming together and trying to resolve itself. So it is a religious war happening right now. The last war, the third world war, will be a religious war, and that's what you're starting to see. Factions of old rigid patriarchy going toe to toe, and they will extinguish each other, and all it will do will leave more room for the matriarchy to come online. So I'm okay with how it shows up, because I know at the end of the day, and at the end of that cycle and the beginning of ours, that it is necessary to clear out in order to create a new cycle and a new regime of you know, of healthiness, holisticness, and unity. Okay, we can't, if they are coexisting, we can't build on top of coexisting, you know, old regimes. We have to clear. Okay. All right, family, I'm out. It's getting late. I'm gonna go take care of, I gotta go prepare some meals for my little ones. Okay, so hopefully this was helpful. I love you. We always have wonderful discussions. You know, you all add such wonderful perspectives to all we discuss. So just, you know, hopefully this was something to invoke a little thought in your days, in your it's only 6 p.m. Yeah, 6 p.m. is when I'm supposed to make my meals. My meals should be ready, and nothing is ready right now. Because I'm talking to you fine, wonderful people. All right, family. Peace. Love you. Mwah. Have a wonderful evening.